How much podcasting's cost Spotify? The latest from podnews.net with Libsyn. Stop dreaming, start podcasting. Spotify released its financials for Q2 23. Monthly active users grew 27% to 551 million. Paid subscribers also grew 17%. But the company lost $272 million in the quarter. Part of that was $45 million in what they call content asset write-offs and contract terminations, all around rationalizing their podcast content portfolio, and a further $12 million in costs related to laying off 200 people from its podcast division. Podcast ad revenue was up 30% year-on-year, though, with sold impressions hitting an all-time high, partially offset by softer pricing. In an earnings call, Daniel Ek explained that now Spotify knows better what works and what doesn't.
We have a lot more data across the millions of podcasts we already have about what that does to new user acquisition, to retention, to conversion to subscribers, etc. And not surprisingly, what we're finding is that some of these shows work really well with our audience. Some of them don't work well. Some of them work well, but during a different cost structure. So we probably overpaid relative to what we should have done. We're coming at this with the process of right-sizing some deals, doubling down on some of the things that worked really nicely, and then stepping out of some deals and relationships that hasn't worked out.
In further thoughts about Spotify's results, Karen Kwok from Reuters suggests that Spotify is locked in contract negotiations with major labels, and it's beneficial for them not to sound too positive about the future. And Variety claims that Spotify Podcast's high-growth era is probably over. It uses data from Edison Research that appears to show a slight dip in spoken words share on the platform. Podcasts account for 1 out of 5 hours consumed on Spotify. Elsewhere, lining up against Spotify and Audible, an audiobooks app which promises to share its profits with independent bookshops has been launched internationally. Libro.fm also offers monthly memberships. Kai Chuck, YouTube's head of podcasting, will be at Podcast Movement next month. He'll be interviewed by OSHA's CMO, Jennifer Han. What's the job title that should be at every company? According to a white paper from Oxford Road and a number of marketers, the Chief Audio Officer is the missing ingredient to unlock the power of audio advertising. We'll link to that today. Former head of audio for Harry and Meghan, Rebecca Sananes, writes for Vanity Fair, after the podcast gold rush, is audio too corporate to be cool? The word podcast even leaves some of us cringing, she claims. Journalists only respond to less than 3% of all pitches they receive, says a pitch for a story sent to us by Propel. However, podcasters open 73% of the pitches they receive, says the data. And journalists like pitches about podcasts too, with over 5 times the response rate to the average pitch. Blueberry has launched a new playlist player for its hosted customers. Sounder is to announce an agreement today with 1 Million Ads, otherwise known as AMA. The partnership will combine Sounder's brand suitability and contextualized targeting technology with AMA's dynamic creative ad platform. And Indian podcast hosting company Hubhopper is working with Superfan, an augmented reality and metaverse company. The press release says creators and brands can seamlessly enhance their content with AR elements such as virtual objects, interactive games, and dynamic visual effects. Ooh, good. And in podcast news, iHeart's Stuff You Should Know is making a kids' book. We spotted that coming in February 2020. The Ezra Klein Show is coming to public radio. PRX is to work with the New York Times to offer it as a 1-hour show from November the 10th. In the latest Popecast, Pope Francis listens to recorded questions of a group of young people who share their personal stories and responds with words of encouragement. The show's in Italian. Good Jibes with Latitude 38 has made it to episode 100. The show was launched in 2021 by the sailing magazine for West Coast USA sailors. In a special episode, host Mo Roddy interviews the all-star crew behind Latitude 38 sailing magazine and Good Jibes. It's produced by Max Podcasting, and founder Max Brandstetter tells us it's his first podcast production client that he's taken from 0 to 100. And I'm Not Here to Hurt You is new from the Irish Independent with the true story of Ireland's polite bank robber. John O'Hegarty studied philosophy at the University of Leuven in Belgium and had a master's in psychoanalytic studies from Trinity College in Dublin. This podcast is sponsored by Libsyn. Are you ready to tell your story? Libsyn has an all-in-one, fast, easy podcast tool that allows you to plan, record and create your podcast today. Stop dreaming, start podcasting with Libsyn at libsyn.com. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.